Suckle on some fairy toast dipped in barbecue sauce, or eat it a la carte. Because in the world where my mangas end up taking place, the point of selling druid orc arms or dicing up some goblins to feed to the community is literally all about the cruelty and revenge aspect of it. The pages you just saw are from the series The Devil's Deal, which is in the same world as every other series that I write. The reason you see street vendors selling orc, and yet there are orc prostitutes and just orc people living in the same area not bothered by this at all. And yet in my Night of Slaughter series, you literally have a collage of different races and species all working together respectively for the same goal. All comes down to location, location, location. Night of Slaughter takes place at the Tower of Babel, which is in the Yershava range. Yet the Devil's Deal takes place in the Chaos Plains, specifically within Florashade. The Deep Stalker Crow series takes place in the East. Because I base my world and all these stories off different historical and location-based situations. The East has their own issues, such as going through their own version of what might be the Holocaust in modern time when the Devil's Deal takes place. In the Deep Stalker Crow series, especially the new chapter, you're going to be seeing leading up to some pretty horrific events that's going to be taking place. So yeah, eating some fairies is some pretty bad stuff, but what you're about to witness in Deep Star Crow is about to be a Disneyland park. But back to the fairies. They are dead, right? They're not alive while they're sucking on them down, right? So when it comes to fairy delicacies, something you need to remember is there are a couple types. They can either be alive or they can be past tense. People treat fairies like they're chicken wings effectively. Do you want them boned or do you want them deboned? And you may be like, Dark, well, if they're deboned, they're obviously not alive. And you are correct, which is why they came up with a solution called a bone softener. Yeah, you know where this is about to go. So what they do is they will take the fairies and they will literally put them in a jar where only their head is exposed. And they will literally leave them in there for days while the material basically goes to their skin, into their bones, and softens their bones to where you can literally just roll a fairy literally neck to butt, no issues. And that way when you eat them, the bones are actually kind of chewy versus hard and crunchy and dangerous. The fairy obviously is alive, and it is not a necessarily painful process for the bone softening, but it's definitely a very miserable experience. And for living fairies without the bone softener, what they'll usually do is they'll break the bones. They'll literally push on the chest to crack the ribs to make the bone small enough to where it's not going to actually hurt going down. And they'll do the same thing for the legs. And obviously they won't have tongues usually. They'll basically gag them so they can't scream. It's, once again, meant to be cruel, meant to be inhumane, because the Great Collection and its people want the fairies to suffer. For those who want a little bit more humane option, who may not necessarily agree with all this suffering, they do offer, past tense fairies, softened bones or not. Because they have a whole industry around sending adventurers, hunters to go out into Fey groves to kidnap fairies and other types of fairy. Like, don't even get me started on the fire chicken woman. Like, the frigate is absolutely 100% justified in its absolute on-site policy when it comes to Great Collection personnel. The fairies aren't the only people to actually suffer in the Great Collection. Heathens get similar treatment. And heathens are anyone who the church deems as problematic. Let's just say that. And we're going to explore that in The Devil's Deal when this woman, Selma, potentially has to make a deal with the devil, potentially becoming a heathen, in order to save her family and home. If you're a shonen reader, you want something a little bit more familiar with a dark twist, definitely check out Night of Slaughter, as it follows her realization that her wish to become a knight in her father's holy order is not necessarily like the books made it out to be.